what's something that's painful that that you looking back, you say, you know what, that really was actually okay. It ended up working out. Like, what's painful for you?
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever say it's okay. I think that, as I mentioned, I'm thankful that God's still in the business of redemption. But it's definitely made me who I am today. And, it started, Chad, with I started ANNUITAS. I co-founded ANNUITAS because I was on the road about 250,000 miles a year. And I had 4 small children and I just wanted to be home. But then as ANNUITAS grew, so did my ego. And I started to just pursue a false purpose, make money, get notoriety. My ego couldn't get enough. I wrote my first book in 2015 about marketing. And when people would come up to me at a trade show and say, "Oh my word, you're Carlos, can you sign my book?" My ego just soaked it up. And I actually, in the book, in the Un-American Dream, I say I became quite unfulfilled and quite narcissistic in the process. Well, when you become a narcissist, you also believe that you can do anything, that rules don't apply to you. And I cloaked it pretty well. I kept people at a distance, but that led to some personal choices of me walking out of my marriage and neglecting my family and pursuing relationships I had no business to pursue. And it ruined me. I became a shell of myself. And I basically told God, sit here on the park bench, I'll take care of this. And in 2015, at the very end of 2015 in October, it all came crashing down around me and I was exposed. And I had a dear friend who was also our corporate attorney at the time call me and said, "I'm not calling you as your attorney, I'm calling you as your friend. You have one or two choices. Either fall on your knees and ask God for forgiveness and your family, or just go live the life that you've been living, that you've been keeping a secret for so long." And it was a gut punch. But it was a loving gut punch. And I'm so glad John made that call. And from there, I just started the long, hard process of shedding all of the false identity that I had embraced on who I thought I was and who I thought people wanted me to be. Had no idea. My wife and I separated. My children at that point really didn't want a whole lot to do with me. And I remember I lived in Colorado Springs at the time. I remember there were days I'd drive down I-25 and I'd look at Pikes Peak and I would say, "God, I don't know how you are going to redeem this, but if you put Pikes Peak there, you can do something awesome here." And most days that was the only prayer I had. And then I would pray and give me the strength to believe that. And so it was hard. It was brutal. I decided to leave that agency in 2016. At that point, Suzanne and I were still separated, and I didn't do it as a way to try to get her back. I did it because I knew if I wasn't who God wanted me to be, who created me to be, and at my healthiest, I wasn't going to be good to anybody else. Thankfully, he has restored our marriage. We actually talk about we're in our second marriage, the same, but two very different people. I've got a great relationship with my children. And here I sit almost 6 years later, absolutely in awe at his grace.
Were you raised with faith, or did it come, did you start with it, you strayed, or did it come later in life, or how did faith enter your life?
Yeah, the God I was raised with is not the God that I worship today. I can tell you that. I was raised in a very staunch, evangelical, fundamental, and it's interesting they call it fundamental because there's nothing fun about it, legalistic environment where my picture of God as a kid, even into my teens and early 20s, was just this cranky old man who was waiting for you to screw up so he could bring down the hammer. So through my journey, faith has played a huge role. I did walk away from it from a long time. Definitely not a religious guy, but I'm a spiritual person, and I'm one who holds fast to his faith in God and in Jesus. But I walked away from it. And I know that, the parable of the prodigal, very similar, except I didn't tell my earthly father to go pound sand and wish he was dead. I just literally wanted God out of my life, and it became a hell on earth for me. And so my journey, my view of God has changed. My relationship with God has changed. I think it's so much deeper. I really feel like he's my dad. When I'm in trouble, I can go to him. When I'm excited, he's excited with me. When he needs to kind of pull me aside and have a stern talking to, we do that too. But it has been something that I've returned to, but it looks vastly different for me. And I think the biggest thing that I hold fast to is I don't think God looks at us and says, how could you do these things? I think God looks and says, who wounded you in the past to make you believe this was your only choice? And then gently restores us in a way that only a preeminent, loving, perfect, just God can. And that is the God that I relish. And I remember in my darkest days, I used to think the prodigal son must have felt like an idiot after he did everything he did, squandered every last penny, and his dad throws him a party. Like he had to be just sitting there going, oh my word, I just can't wait to get out of here. And I don't believe that anymore. I think he wept.
For sure. And said, you know what? I'm happy he's home. Yeah.
I think, well, I think the prodigal himself wept,
Oh
just
yeah. And the prodigal figured it out.
overwhelmed with grace from his dad. And that's the God that I follow.